Put some music after this. While Silent Hill 2 retains the same basic format of the original, the story is decidedly more coherent and the graphics have been upgraded immeasurably. 100 stands strong as the top survival horror game of the decade. 100. It's scary, beautifully imaginative, and just when you think it's got as mad and twisted as it possibly could, you're treated to a stranger stands strong as the top survival horror game of the decade. 100.
I'm Des. It's Halloween.
No, it's not. Fuck, seriously?
So we missed Halloween pretty bad. But luckily this November is looking pretty spooky.
Silent Hill 2.
Widely regarded as the best in the series, I find that most fans either land in the 2 section or the 3 section, and I've noticed there's a pretty small group of people that hold 4 rather high as well. I'm pretty excited for that one actually. But what do we think about Silent Hill 2? Could it truly be the
Greatest
of all time?
Wow, that's intense. Yeah, it is, isn't it? That's what we're here to find out today, folks. I came into this game with high expectations. The fans had piqued my interest, and I was really excited to see what this game had in store. And I'd be lying if I said my expectations were met right away. The game's opening sequence introduces us to James and his deceased wife, who suspiciously sent him a letter through a fair bit of exposition before giving us control over James. And to be fair, it opens really well. The excruciatingly long walk to Silent Hill through the woods as angry dogs are heard and footsteps just out of pace beyond our vision is chilling and builds a fair amount of tension. But just as the game that came before it, in Silent Hill 2 we'll be combating various enemies using melee and ranged weapons, which takes a certain edge off and puts me personally in a different survival horror mindset. For me, this took a lot of tension away from the first monster encounter, but it served well for what it was, and the introductory sequence serves as more of a tutorial. From here, James makes his way to Rosewater Park, where he meets Maria, one of several characters James will run into throughout the game, but unlike the rest of them, something is different about Maria, in the way she looks eerily close to Mary.
You were gonna just leave me?
No, but...
With all these monsters around?
No,
I'm all alone here. Everyone else is gone. I look like Mary, don't I? You loved her, right?
For me, the game began to lose steam around here. Running from here to there, finding snippets of information, and meeting the first few characters was memorable, but the beginning process seemed to droll on initially. It wasn't until a scene towards the end of the hospital section that I became really invested in the game and its characters. The controls are definitely an improvement over the first Silent Hill and feel a lot smoother to work with, although you'll be running into an awful lot of ammo and health supplies throughout your journey. Some camera angles are spot on, and generally the game does a great job of directing the player with its angles and subtle cues as well. The endings even depend on smaller actions you perform throughout the game, like examining a knife every so often and playing with a more risky playstyle. Visually, the game is a leap from Silent Hill, but it can also be muddy and vignette sometimes, which fortunately isn't much of an issue as it helps to create a surreal, disconnected, dreamlike feel in any given area. You'll be able to see much farther than you did in the original game, and personally I didn't feel this affected the atmosphere much. The standout moments are definitely the eerie silent ones you'll be having throughout the course of the game, lending it a sort of distraught and lonely feeling. The narrative is impressive when compared to Silent Hill for the PS1, leaving behind the idea of the cult, albeit not entirely, which was a good thing if you ask me, and instead going for a more personal journey unique to James with symbolism sprinkled just
everywhere.
You should definitely play this game. It's a classic in the horror genre, and if you haven't, you owe it to yourself to play the series through from the beginning, because it's truly unique and ahead of its time as an entire series. It has its spooks, it has its cover of gameplay, but underneath it all is a psychological trip through the town of Silent Hill, which just might be the most interesting character of all of them.
Forgive me.
What didn't I like about Silent Hill 2? That's gotta be the hardest one to answer yet. First of all, I think there's a better way to implement monsters and weapons into horror games. The AI for the monsters in this game could be much smarter. The sounds they make are horrifying, and the tension built from specific camera angles in this are amazing, but when it comes down to avoiding these things, it's as simple as... I especially feel this way about Pyramid Head. Ultimately, that's not what the game is about, and I think it's fantastic the way it is. But I was let down by his introduction and his appearances as boss fights. It was entirely underwhelming, and while a lot of the game really drove the horror home with its atmosphere and more subtle moments, I feel these could have been used to really break ground in the genre. The gameplay is easily the weakest part of the entire game, but for what it's worth, it's a basic survival horror game on its surface, and that works just well enough. My biggest criticisms would be against the AI and the repetitive nature of each building's gameplay. Once you've played the game and know which doors work, everything is much smoother, and it really helps the replayability of the game too. The game's abrupt ending, while fitting and sweet any way you put it, caught me off guard though. My first playthrough was about 6 to 7 hours. I expected the game to go deeper really, but ultimately we were deeply satisfied with the game. It's drenched in symbolism, and it's the kind that can really penetrate your subconscious and get a message across with no words whatsoever. This is the game's strongest point, and easily its greatest aspect. Everything from the enemies to the environment other characters are met in changed to mean one thing or another, and that's amazing. Not enough games pay as much attention to detail as Silent Hill 2 did. Said, you want to talk about symbolism and stuff like we have in our older videos? Yeah, actually, let's do that. Where do we start? First of all, Silent Hill seems different for every person that enters it. That means Eddie's Silent Hill looks different from James's Silent Hill, whose Silent Hill looks different from Angela's Silent Hill, and so on. Even Laura perceives Silent Hill differently, and that's part of the reason she can get around unharmed. But Maria isn't like anybody else. Maria is essentially a demon sent to prey on James, or maybe even a device built by him to cope with Mary's death. Maria symbolizes James's longing for Mary before she died or was diagnosed with her sickness that ultimately led to her murder. Just as Pyramid Head symbolizes James's suppressed desire for punishment of his sins, but that's more outright stated than anything else. Each enemy also symbolizes in one way or another James's hatred or sexual frustration he links to Mary and her sickness. Or the way that James's otherworld always seems damp and wet, deteriorating from years of water damage, maybe already suggesting that ultimately the in-water ending was his fate. Throughout the game, he'll also be plunging deeper and deeper into holes found in several places, metaphorically symbolizing James's descent into his inner psyche until he comes to realize his actions. What about the room we fight Angela's daddy in, with 23 thrusting pistons lining the tops of what seem to be outstretched skin or muscle of some sort for walls? This scene resonated with me even the very first time I saw it, and I personally can't think of a better example of something getting such a point across in such a way ever, honestly. These are the sort of things that make this game worth replaying and getting invested in and paying close attention to detail. It's rewarding and ultimately allows us to forgive its shallow, gamey mechanics to be absorbed in its narrative. So what do you think about this one, Zed?
This one gets a 9.5 out of 10.